The other issue, and this is one that ripped apart the Wa'ahila Ridge fight that I mentioned earlier. A number of groups had come together and we had formed a coalition and we'd come up with a slogan, no need. And then certain individuals began secretly negotiating with the utility to try to get a boardroom solution that it would at least solve their issue regardless of whether it impacted the other players involved in the fight. To me, compromise is not something you go in doing. Rather, you go in doing, accepting two things. One, you may not be firm enough, so you need more to fight harder and tougher in the beginning. Because after all, if you use a sports analogy, if a team plays, or basketball, if a team plays really hard, you got to play defensive. But if they start giving you 5 yards, 10 yards, 20 yards, the other team starts to take advantage of you. So you can't compromise in the beginning. You have to be really firm, really solid. And by being really firm and really solid, you can discover things that you hadn't even thought about, other steps to interfere and screw up with things. I'll give you, for an example, this is something from this past week. The Public Utilities Commission has opened up a docket to examine the Lanai wind farm proposal. And they invited Castle and Cook Resorts in as the property representing the wind farm developer. And Castle and Cook Resorts informed the PUC, no, it's not Castle and Cook Resorts, it's Castle and Cook Properties. You've misidentified which party is developing the wind farm, and therefore we want more time to prepare our defense. I mean, of course we knew Lanai, Castle and Cook Properties and Castle and Cook Resorts are like part of the same company, with their own separate law firms. And then they said, and we also want into the docket Hawaii Inter-Island Cable, the company owned by Pattern Energy and Biological Capital. And they said, we've been working with these guys for 2 years. Why can't we identify who we are and let this other party into the docket? So we wrote to the Public Utilities Commission and said, Hawaii Inter-Island Cable only informed the state that they were an entity to form business in this state as of May 2012. So they were not around for 2 years. So here, Castle and Cook Resorts and Castle and Cook Properties are saying, identify the right party, and they're also making the same error. So it's sort of like, it's like needling the other side and making sure they know that you're there. You don't give in, you fight back. You fight harder and harder, because I don't like compromise. I don't like mediation.
I have particularly been struck by the willful negligence of the regulatory agencies. And it seems to me that there ought to be a way to draw attention to that. However, I'm slowly coming to think that maybe the only way is through the courts. If you would comment on how to hold agencies responsible for regulation responsible, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Traditionally, the Public Utilities Commission has been 3 commissioners paid $90,000, $95,000 a year each. One making all the decisions, and the other 2 collecting what was called High 3, boosting up their retirement salary. This Public Utilities Commission, for the first time ever, has 3 very strong, 3 independent minds capable of each thinking for themselves, and it's a Public Utilities Commission unlike any we've ever had before. So it has enormous possibilities, not only as a group, but also splitting the commissioners. I've never seen so many split decisions. So it's important to be able to influence individual commissioners as well as the group. The other thing going with this commission is that they know they're poorly perceived by the public. They took a poll and found that the public doesn't trust them. So that is actually very good, because they're bending over backwards to try to regain that trust. The third issue And maybe if I take an analogy, do you remember way back when it was the 60s or something, the Justice Department went after IBM for antitrust violations? They said that they were manipulating other companies, and the federal government spent years massing this massive case together, and finally gave up and said the government basically lost. What wasn't known is another company, DEC, Digital Electronics Corp or something, took the same documents, put them in a database, used their computer skills to put them in order, presented them to IBM, and said, these are public documents, so we're not doing anything illegal, but this is how you would build a case against IBM. IBM paid them $100 million to destroy the database. Geothermal and the cable and big wind are the three proceedings with massive, massive amounts of files. There are too much for much of the government to comprehend. By amassing those files, by understanding them, by the team that's going to do the regulatory fight, you will be able to do dances around the regulators, and the courts will be receptive.
How would you frame our fight so that the people in Honolulu actually hear us?
I would frame the fight in a way that you're perceived as multi-party, multiracial, multi-classal, multi-income level, diversity, and that you're fighting for local values, because then you can unite with all the other local fights around the state. So diversity of your body is really important.
How antiquated is the grid, and you know, these geothermal plants are projected to take 5 years to get going, and the 30-year payoff probably on those. Does it seem economically possible that that can work? I mean, is the grid is, in my opinion, I think is going to fail over the next 5 or 10 years. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
One of the reasons that the HELCO rates are so high is you have a very old grid that's very extensive. You have a lot of aging equipment. The company knows they have a lot of aging equipment, and they have come up with this twin strategy. On the one hand of saying they need to spend billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars over the next few years upgrading the generation and transmission. And on the other hand, your rates will go down, caveat, lower than they would have gone up had we not done this. In other words, Hawaiian Electric, HELCO say that the rates are going to go up till 2020, and then if LNG is cheaper, and if we can get it here, and if we can put in the infrastructure, and if we can put in the generators, and if, then your rates will be lower than what would have happened had we not done that. So basically, HELCO believes your rates are going up. That's how they make a profit. The higher your rates, the higher they make profits. The CEO of Hawaiian Electric Industries made $5.6 million last year, and on this lousy integrated resource plan, the utility spent $6 million. So the way to get to them is to knock down demand, because if you reduce demand on the grid, then they have less need for new generation. Regulators won't endorse new generation, and it will put financial pressure on the utility to do something to change the way they do things, or to drive them out of business.